Hello and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I am going to be showing you how I made this little ink cube storage container for my Lawn Fawn inks. To start with, I'm just measuring my little ink cubes. These are about 1¼ inch by 1¼ inch square. So to start with, I am going to make the little shelves and dividers. Now I have cut strips of cardboard 1 inch thick or wide. I don't know how you want to say that. Anyway, I did this because it needed to be a little bit shorter than the actual ink cubes themselves so that you could get them in and out easily without, knocking into other things. So I'm just measuring for my space between each of the cubes. My long pieces will be the horizontal shelves and the shorter pieces will be the vertical dividers. So these will both have slightly different measurements, but all you really want to do is make sure that between the spaces, there is enough area for both the ink cube as well as the cardboard on either side of it, if that makes any sense. So here I'm finding half of the cardboard strip and I'm making a line. And that is because for this, I want to cut out some little notches halfway up the cardboard. This is because the two pieces of cardboard will interlock. I'm also making some little tabs on each end of the cardboard. That way it can stick into the frame of the little divider that I'm going to be making. Now, if you're listening to me talk and this doesn't make any sense to you, maybe just watching will help you. This isn't something I feel like I'm super great at explaining. But basically, both ends have to have these little notches, and I'm cutting out the same amount from each side. Now, for my marks, I'm trying to show you this little tiny black line that's mostly faded off at this point, but I'm trying to take out the smallest amount of cardboard I can at each of the lines that I marked. And this will be to insert the cardboard spacers, and these need to go halfway up. I didn't want them too wide because then the cardboard would have wiggle room, and I didn't really want it to do that either. I recommend that you measure the width of your cardboard or thickness of your cardboard just to make sure that you're getting your little notches cut out as close to the size as you can. And also for spacing purposes, this is something that you kind of need to measure out. But I'm just cutting these little notches out up to that line, taking them out, and I just repeat the process for each of the lines that I marked. So basically for my measurements, I just took the measurement of each ink cube and then I added the space for cardboard on either side of it. And then I made it slightly wider than that, just so that I gave myself a little bit of room for error. And then I multiplied that by how many I wanted, and then I had my measurements. So this might be something you have to try a couple times before you really get it, but this is the exact same process that I use to make my marker holders. And basically you could do it for any kind of cube storage that's small. Obviously I wouldn't do anything too heavy in these. It is just cardboard, so you can damage it. But I do try to make mine as sturdy as possible, and I had made one for my markers before, and I think I had it for about 3.5 years. It's been a while, so it's still holding up. I actually gave it to my oldest son to use. But here you can see two different size spacers. Well, the big one's the shelf, and the small one is for the little spacers in between. So here I have marked that little red mark, if you can see it. And that's just because it was kind of in between the lines, so I had to make a new line for it. And I'm just measuring out my lines again and cutting my stuff. I have actually cut more shelves and spacers than I needed. I only needed 6 for this, and I cut out 7 for some reason. But here I'm just interlocking the pieces. I'm using hot glue to make sure they stay because my notches were a little bit wider than I would have preferred, but this will also keep it from moving around too much. It'll help it be a little bit more sturdy. Be careful here though, I did burn myself. I'm just going through and adding glue to all the notches and making sure that the long pieces are all in the same direction and then the short pieces are all in the same direction. And it'll create sort of a grid. Now that my shelves and spacers are completely put together, I'm going to measure the sides and the top and the bottom. And I'm doing this to create a sort of case for these to go in. Now this one, I'll cut one for each side to start with, and then I'm going to measure out where I need to cut in the little slits in the center to make room for the notches that are on the vertical and horizontal spacers. These are also cut at 1 inch. Now that I have my strips cut down, I am going to make them the length that they need to be compared to the shelves and the spacers. And after that, I'm just going to test real quick, make sure that it looks like it's the right size. Measuring again, because I don't really want to go through all the work of cutting out the notches and then it'd be wrong. And now I'm going to mark the exact same spaces that I used for the shelves and spacers. And this will just be marking for where I need to cut the notches out. Once all those are marked, I am going to use the exact same measurement that I used to cut out the notches, and I am going to make a line on either side of my strips. This will just keep me in the very center of each of the strips so that my stuff lines up pretty well. Can't say it's perfect because, well, it's cardboard and my measurements may not be exact, but it'll be close enough. So now just using my ruler, and I'm going to draw the lines through the center of each of the strips. Now, because I really didn't want to have any issues, I am testing it sort of against the spot that it's supposed to go on to make sure that the strips line up with my lines for the most part. It's not completely perfect, but it's fine. It'll work. So now I'm just going to cut out some little slits in the center. Instead of going from the edge to the center, I'm just using those center lines to try to keep my cuts straight in the middle of those. Now, I did this to the top, the bottom, and both of the sides. And now you can see there's notches cut out, and I can put some glue in those and then put those right over the little, I don't even know what you would call those. The notches cut out are going to go over the notches that I cut into the ends of the dividers, I guess. Like I said, I'm really terrible at explaining these things. But anyway, got the top, the bottom, and then I repeat the process for the sides. It's exactly the same. You're just trying to make little slits where the notches need to go, and this will be the basic frame for your organizer. Now, as I'm putting the sides on, I did realize that I made them just a smidge too long. This is an easy fix. Just cut off the end a little bit. It doesn't even have to be perfect here. You're going to add some glue. You're also going to reinforce this with more cardboard. So I'm just gluing the edges together. I'm being really stupid about this. I'm touching the hot glue. I do this every time. I burn myself so much with the hot glue gun. I think I need adult supervision, which is sad because I'm an adult. moving on to the rest of the frame, I am going to keep these also at roughly, well actually I think I did it about 1.125 inches width, just slightly larger than the other pieces I cut. And that's just to make sure that I have enough to kind of frame up the whole thing pretty well. I'm going to cut these down to the size of the top, the bottom, and the sides. And I am making sure that it's slightly longer than the one before that for at least 2 of the pieces so that it frames it up better, because otherwise you'll have like a gap between the top and the sides and the bottom. Now that it is fully framed, I am going to measure that, and then I am going to cut out another piece of cardboard with those measurements. So here it is. And now, because I didn't want to have to paint this, I used some paper and this spray adhesive, and I sprayed the paper, and now I'm just laying it on to the cardboard. This will give me a nice colored background without a ton of work. Just checking to make sure it fits. And now I'm doing something that I did for my other organizers, which was fine for my other organizers, but it took me forever for this one because there's so many like little areas to cover up with paper. But here I'm just cutting strips of paper that will wrap around the front side of all of the edges of the cardboard. And then I'm going to attach them with my score tape, which if you're going to do the paper route, if you can, I recommend using spray adhesive if at all possible. I don't have a good way to keep my area well ventilated, and it was too cold outside for me to do it outside, so I didn't use spray adhesive. But here I've covered everything in paper. Again, it's just a matter of measuring and taping or gluing or whatever. And now I'm going to attach the back to the organizer, and I'm just using packing tape. I could have tried to use hot glue, but I didn't want the glue mess, and since nothing in here is going to be too heavy, I figured tape would work just fine. I'm also going to cover the outside edges with tape because this is paper and I didn't want it to rip or get messed up. So this is the easy way to do this. You could probably cover it with Mod Podge or, some kind of sealant, but I'm just using packing tape. This was much faster. But I do recommend if you do this and you have like a lot of little sections like I do, I would definitely put paint on it instead of paper. It'll just be quicker. And here is my completed organizer, all filled with my ink cubes. I have a couple more spaces left. This particular tutorial works for any size organizer as long as you have cardboard big enough. I will be back with another video soon. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye!